Hello, Gaz here, and this is a lightning session. So we were talking about what we can do in terms of spec-driven development. This is a course, or this is a lightning lesson around it as well. So I had this Maven lightning that this is part of it as well. So if we go to probably Maven and then spec-driven, that was the lesson that we were talking about as well. So the idea is we want to talk about what would be better, or how we can actually have a spec-driven and that actually ships product as well. So this is a coding agent. So spec-driven counts for when we want to do something rather than going for just do it ourselves, just prompting. We try to write our specs. There are different frameworks. One of the popular ones is GitHub spec-kit. So if you go to GitHub spec-kit, you can see it's quite popular. It's got around, I think, 100,000 something likes as well. So GitHub spec-kit, and what you can do is just adopt it for your daily tasks as well, right? So I've had really good experiences with it as well. So let's just talk about it, right? So we're going to talk about the problem, what would be the normal case, and then what would be the spec kit that we want to talk about as well, and see what would be different. So this is around writing something which is quite executable. So if we're not writing prompts, we're planning, and then we go with the driving spec kits instead of typing at all, right? So the first thing we run is usually init, or initialization of spec-kit, and then we go with constitution, and after that we go with planning and then implementing. So let's just see one of the examples. So I've got the code here as well. So the code itself is a spec-kit that you can go through. This is a README, one step at a time. And what it does is, when you initialize, this is my code base, right? So my code base itself is a simple project. It's supposed to have different routing to different folders and just arrive to different conclusions within each one of the routes. And then we have the server, and the server just writes and gives you an answer. And then we have the store, which is just a store, right? So really simple routing to different items, and we return the store, which is the store comes from store TS, right? So really simple, and it really gives you simple answers within the items. And you see the seeds here, and seed comes from the create store, and create store is something that we call here as well, right? So really simple. And the idea is we don't want to just complicate stuff. We just want to have the idea around API rate limiting. So in order to do it, I have different options. One of them is just prompt through my AI and just do it. Another way is to go with spec-kit. So spec-kit starts with going around having the constitution, right? So the first thing we do. So what happens is, within the normal cases, if I ask AI to give me some sort of answer within the API rate limiting, it just assumes a lot of stuff. So it just goes to say, okay, I deploy fixed window is an algorithm to have the rate limiting with Redis structure. We go with the reset header with milliseconds and edit it. So then it just delivers for you. So what happens is a lot of decisions are being made by AI, and you don't want to do that, right? So as someone who's prompting AI, you are the decision maker here as well, right? So the question is no longer can it write the code, and writing the code is not a problem anymore. The problem itself is planning and making decisions. So decisions are the key parts that you care about, and this is a part that you want to write the code for as well. So the spec is 4 things, and a tool will write 3. So it defines the interface, it defines acceptance criteria, and it also defines the constraints and conventions as well, right? So if I go through this code as well, you can see the specs here. I've got like the first one, which is the items, and you can see I've got the tasks here, I've got the spec, and then you can see the spec says is the item APIs, a minimal HTTP JSON API with no framework. So this is the response, and then we talked about the session, record and retrieve items, and confirm the service is alive, and predictable responses. So this is how we done the APIs, and it's quite easy, and it's just gone to the tasks. So each time that I'm developing a task, you can see each one of them are done. So create a project structure, initialize, and this is how I start the project. And after that, when I wanted to do the rate limiting, I go again, specify another thing, and then I have again another specs here. Within this one, I have the checklist, and I have the contract that I want as well. So every one of these ones are something I can read through, accept them, or change them before even writing any code. So interface and types are all defined within my contracts and within my spec files. So this is pretty good. Then I've got the acceptance criteria. So whatever is important for me, I'm going to have it here as well. And then I'll go to the constraints and conventions as well, right? So the idea is if you init the project and you say like I'm using Cloud Code, so we're going to use that as well. And you can see within the structure, specify init after installation, and then you go constitution, which is the first part that you do it. So it comes with principles that you can find them within a specify as well, right? So these are what it came up with the memory, and then there's a constitution here. It says fail allow, the agent fence. So there's a lot of like principles that we care about within the code base as well. So then it comes with the specify, and I said within a specify what sort of features I'm after. Clarify is a loop that asks you many questions. So before doing anything, it just wants to make sure you mean what you want to do. And then you go plan it, create task, and you go implement one after another, right? So a really easy way to use spec-driven, 8 documents, none of them typed by human. And that's mainly a lot of documents for just doing a task, which is what we want to define a task. And this allows us to have a better definitions. So just make sure the tool does the typing, right? So there's a lot of typing. It asks you questions. So if I, for example, here and say, first I need to go to cloud, for example, and then I say specify, specify, and then I say clarify. It's going through the project, comes up with answers that with the questions that we need to make a decision on. Then it asks me, I'm going to provide answers to those questions. And from then on, I can guarantee that this is exactly doing what I mean it to do as well. So the contract is the part you still have to decide. So you might go with the data model as well. You can absolutely add anything here as well. So the data model here is the structure. I can definitely add them here or just define them within a spec file. And then I go with pros can argue that failing test cannot. And I know the spec. I exactly know the research and task and so on. So then I know the criteria, needs API testing and so on as well. Then this just goes and implement the whole thing. So same sentence twice, only one of them is checked. And you can see the constitution, if it's written very well, you know, don't change the test files. I know I don't want to update test files every time. The tests are valid. So if something's wrong, you need to fix the code as well. So you can define any sort of like principles that you want to have within these ones as well. So offense, you can watch the agent hit, and that's around the planning. So within the planning, you know exactly what needs to be done, and then you can commit them, deliver them one after another as well. You don't have to deliver the whole thing after it becomes a task, but planning, it just makes sure it goes one after another and puts it into the document. Something that you need to do, but when you're prompting, you might miss it, is being handled by the framework. So why not just use the framework? So here I asked for example, specify, and it just asked me around, can a caller get itself an unlimited allowance simply by sending a different X client ID value on every request, or must its network address still cap it? So this is valid. What if someone trying to hack a system and then it just sends different X client IDs? It says trust the header, a caller that rotates this, does it get fresh allowance each time? Count every request, ignore this entirely, and always key on the network address, provide a different short answer, right? So I'm going to say, like, for example, trust the header, because this is like an easy one that I'm like, okay, I don't want to just overcomplicate it, right? So you can see how useful it can be by just questioning your solutions and coming up with something that you need to make a decision. And once you're quite happy with tons of questions that you answered, you know this is exactly what you want to do as well. So normally when we go, we say add rate limiting to the API and that's it. And there's nothing defined very well with these boundaries. But if you go with the 4 commands to just do the specific spec-kit plan, spec-kit task, and spec-kit implement, you know you're going based on the plans, and you know you've counted the key parts that's important to you as well. And you know, there's a lot of like logic sitting within the framework or done by the previous developers that you're respecting as well. So the whole guardrail is a diff and 2 globs as well. So then you can have a bit of a guardrail, and the guardrail can help you to just write the test and just making sure you're running the test every time as well. 3 rows says no equivalent, and there are same rows 3 times. Says the constraint and allowance and the gate, that something allows you to have a good system. Just make sure you're delivering based on the criteria. So the gate itself can make sure you're respecting the boundaries, and you can absolutely do that as well. Empty directory to enforce a spec is something that we go through as well. And then spec init, constitution, spec implement, and then bolt the gate on. It's just something you can go through. Write the one acceptance criterion and then ping a boundary, and you know, so you can absolutely do that, right? So really easy. And again, he asked me again another question. It says, when no client on the header is present, is the network access the direct socket address of a whoever connected, or should a forwarding header such as this be consulted first? So socket address only, and I'll go, okay, just A, and again, I answered another one as well. They might come up with multiple questions depending on like how complex is your system, or you might just prompt it again and again. Just be sure you haven't missed anything. And once you've done that, it's like a pretty good plan, and it just goes and you can run the implement on it as well. So keep that in mind, run the constitution, spec init constitution, then go with defining your specify the task that you want to do. So in order to specify, you can write as much you can do within a specification of the task as well. So just exactly say what you want to do. And then you can see the recommendation is option D as well, per request. And I can do that as well, right? So I didn't read this one because, yeah, we don't want to waste a lot of time here as well. So it's really helpful. And once you go implement it, you can see the list of tasks here. And the list of tasks says, is it done or not? So phase 2, fundamental. So after this one, I need to run a spec-kit plan and then a spec-kit tasks. And then I'm going to get the new set of tasks here, and I can go implement the next task, and it just goes, finds out what hasn't been done, and just does that as well. It's pretty useful following the plan. And if you commit these things to the repository, you know exactly that every other developer follows the same principles, They can also contribute within your specs, or they can add their own specs at the end as well, or just work on their own specs. And then if there are any overlaps, you can say analyze, like a spec-kit analyze, and then that's going to find out if there is any overlap between all the specs files as well, because it might happen as well, right? So again, is asking me again another question: when a test needs a track by count, the suggestion here is B. I can go with B, for example, as well. Really helpful. Please start using it, see how it feels. And if you had any problems, just come and ask me as well. I've got this production ready systems with LLM and agents as well, which I'm teaching how to write LLMs or write better codes with LLM and deliver it in production ready mode. So you can come and join those sessions as well. I've got one which is currently running, the one I'm doing next month as well. So just feel free to join that one as well. And if you wanted to get this repository, just join the GitHub Ehsan Gazar lightning lessons, and you can see this one as well. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you liked the lesson, and hope I'm going to see you next time in the next lightning lesson as well. Thank you. Bye.